Hello, my name is Malik, and this is my beautiful black mother, Tasha, and I'll be asking her a few questions today.
Well, hello. Hi.
All right,
Well, thank you for that lovely comment.
All right, Miss Willis, let's get into this. When and where were you born?
I was born in Louisiana, Rame, Louisiana.
All right. How did your family get to Texas? That's real far from Louisiana. Do you remember about the time y'all came to Texas and the reason why?
Actually, my mom and my dad, they were a young couple. They got married out of high school, and my dad, he wanted to come over to Houston, Texas, and kind of get a better job and be able to take care of family in the town that we were from. Honestly, it wasn't a lot of work available, and the jobs, it wasn't plentiful. And the next city upcoming, it was, hey, Texas was the best place that they decided to move to.
All right, so basically for job opportunity.
Yeah.
All right. What do you remember about your childhood? You said you moved from Louisiana to Texas, and pretty sure you had a very interesting childhood.
Honestly, I am the oldest of three. I have two brothers. I'm the oldest. I would say what I remember from my childhood, it would be maybe the schools and so forth. If you're talking about the schools that I attended, when my parents finally got to Houston, they were able to find work, and they were able to later build and kind of have the American dream. They were able to get a house and so forth. So to be honest, my childhood, I had a mom and father who was there, who was present. They showed us good values. One of the things we also, they put me in private school. And one of the things that I was grateful for, and my dad, once he got established in his job, he was able to, they both put me through private school. They wanted me to have the best education. And recently, well, not recently, but later I found out that my parents told me I had to basically move from private school and go to public school. So out of my whole childhood, I would say that was a culture shock, from coming from a private school where we had actually 15 students in the class, and then to a public setting. And going to public education, it was a big difference. I was able to see different things with the language the kids use. I went to Catholic school, and the values that they had, some of the kids. So it was a different total environment. The kids were it was a rough little group going into it.
All right. Yeah. So you said you made that transition from private school to public school. I wanted to ask you, did your parents discuss race and racism with you? Were you aware of the complexion of your skin compared to other people, or was it just a natural thing?
Well, what you mentioned with the racism, I went to all black schools. Black and Hispanics. It wasn't all black, but
even the private school.
Yeah, minorities. It was blacks and Hispanics at the school. I knew there was other cultures out there, but honestly, as far as in racism, my parents never really talked to me about racism. It was more, I think they tried to protect me from certain things, but I didn't have that direct hit with dealing with racism, because racism wasn't. During my childhood, I was sheltered and protected. I didn't know about racism. And I didn't know until later, when I started going into the workforce and I started working, I noticed, that there was a little difference, and I started to observe cultures and so forth.
All right. So, yeah, you kind of been sheltered a little bit, been in your own community. So it's kind of hard to identify racism if you only been in the same community. Do you think that's good culturally that we stay in our own community so we don't have to experience things like racism, or do you think we should integrate with different cultures and things like that?
As I studied history and I looked at different cultures, and not different cultures, but as I studied history, I found out, it seems to me that a lot of the black communities were more prosperous when it was just everybody stayed in their own communities. But the difference is it started happening, and my parents would tell me, is when they started integrating, the different, cultures. The white, the blacks were integrated into with the black schools. And to be honest, even I'm for, equal education, and I'm for everybody should have that deal. But honestly, I think in some aspect, it looked like we were a better people when we were separate instead of mixed in together.
All right. Another question. You said that you stayed in your own community, but when you integrated, what kinds of interactions did you have with people not of your racial background?
Most of the interaction, I would say it was more on a workforce. I remember working a particular job, and I was a cashier. I was probably like maybe 16 or 17, and I remember one of the managers. I remember my mom she got real mad at the manager because I had called her and I told her, the manager had called me a derogatory name.
Oh, wow.
She got upset with me and she wanted me to stay late. And I heard that. I heard her comment that she made. And she called me the N-word. And she was, Anglo, But anyway, and I told my mom about it. And she was like, and she instantly came and, she talked to the lady, you don't do this to my daughter. But I would say that was my first interaction, in dealing with it. I was like, wow, why would she call me that? Just because I didn't want to stay late over, she wanted me to work another shift. But that would be, as far as in the workforce, in that instance that I noticed that. Yes.
All right.
Racism.
So you just basically explained what white supremacy is to me. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that it's still alive, and how do you feel about the whole idea of white supremacy?
I'm gonna be honest, and I know everybody has their own view about it. I know all cultures should take pride in what or who they are. And I believe that each culture, we have our Hispanic, we have Hispanic heritage, we have our Black History Month, we have different deals where everybody cultures appreciate. But I think it becomes a problem when cultures, they celebrate their culture, but they celebrate it with hate. And speaking of that, one of my favorite persons I admire is Dr. King. Dr. Martin Luther King. One of the things that, I love Dr. King's principles is he taught that we have to love one another, and in order to overcome hate, you have to love one another. So, I believe his beliefs in the Dr. King and so forth are something that every person should follow, because one, we don't want to teach hate. We want to teach love. We want to teach cultures that we should unite. We should celebrate each other. And we should, respect the cultures. And we should learn from the cultures. But as far as in white supremacy, if it's teaching hate, I don't think that's a good thing. I think I'm against it, because one, that wasn't, America didn't grow. America is a melting pot. America has people from all over, the world. We celebrate many cultures. Starting from New York, where everybody migrated into America. So I think we should celebrate cultures and not show division and show hate.
All right. Well, the whole principle of white supremacy is basically saying that one race is dominant than the other race, the white race particularly, without even necessarily saying it. It's not anything that you actually, I don't want to say notice. It's more, especially being African American or any minority group, you kind of feel it. And you had just kind of mentioned it a little, saying that the lady, your manager, had called you a derogatory name, or that's a form of white supremacy. So I'm getting to the next question. You talked about the civil rights movement. You said Dr. King, and I love that.
Yes, I love his philosophy.
All right. And I know we talked about your idea or how you experienced race relations growing up. To my knowledge, you wasn't born during the civil rights movement. You was kind of born after. You kind of got the after effects of it. But how did you think your parents growing up and seeing that movement rise? How do you think that that affected them, since they kind of shelter you with race relations? How did you think that affected them?
I think overall, like I said, my family wanted my mom and my dad wanted to protect me, but I think as far as with my my parents, we were from the South. They would tell us stories that of different things that took place in the South. They told us stories about how my grandmother before then had to pick cotton in the fields. My mom told me stories about that. I want better for you. I want in growing up in the South, it was they grew up in poverty. They didn't have the opportunities that I have today. And one of my parents, both of my parents would remind me that, the experiences that they had, how they had to go in to separate theaters and watch movies where it was the whites that were at the top, it was the whites at the bottom, and the blacks had to go all the way to the top. They told me stories about how they had separate water fountains, how, the books, the quality and the education wasn't as suffice. They had basically the old books that they had, and those were handed down from the white schools. So honestly, they both shared with me, their experiences, and their experiences helped me to get an eye that, wow, this world that we live in today is not as fair, and this world that we live in today, it's different. It's not, as I thought, as my grandmother would tell me stories, as my parents would tell me stories, they will remind me where I come from, and basically that, at later as I got older, that, there's things there's people who hate you based on the color of your skin. And like I said, one of the things that Dr. King taught, that we should love one another based on character. You don't hate a person because of how they look. You need to know their character and what's inside of them. Mm-hmm. So yes.
So I'm your son. What advice would you give younger people today? You've seen a lot. Your parents passed down information to you. You pass down information to me, of course. But what advice would you give? Because sometimes the information get lost in translation. What advice would you give younger people?
It's emotional for me. One, in being in the education system, a lot of the children don't know the history that the people who labored before giving us the right to vote, giving us the equal opportunity to go to these state-of-the-art magnet schools. Both of you guys came from magnet schools, and I love my neighborhood schools, but one of the things that I would give to young people: know your history, know where you came from, know that it's still racism that still exists today. And it's quite evident, and it's more evident now in this time period than any time period. Know that, I saw my parents labor that you have to sometimes work harder than the next man. know your value, know your worth, and learn your history. Know and appreciate the people who sacrificed their lives for all of us so that we can vote, so that we can have equal opportunity and have justice. I mean, Dr. King would have loved to be here with his family, but he took the ultimate sacrifice. Malcolm X, all of these great leaders who Rosa Parks, all these great leaders who labored for us, know and appreciate where you come from.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you made a perfect. You said something really good that I wanted to touch on. Didn't write this question down, but you had mentioned that for younger people they need to know your history. But how do you tell them that when the books are written by white people and they manipulate the information and they play with it to make to down credit especially our black warriors? How do you teach them that when it's changed, or the school system they rather teach you about George Washington rather than George Washington Carver? How do you?
And you know that's a tough question. Because honestly,
and you are a teacher, and you have done Black history stuff at your school, but for other schools and not just African Americans really, because this is our history, but our history is a part of American history, so therefore it should be taught not just to African Americans, but to Mexican Americans and white America also, just as much as it's been taught to are supposed to be taught to us.
You know, that's an interesting question that you bring upon. I think you can learn from the people who lived here before. I think you can learn from them and know, and not only taking one source and I'm gonna take everything that they said and it's just research. You know, and that's another issue I think young people have a real trouble in doing. You know, we utilize the social media for social networks instead of doing, and I'm not saying everything on the internet is good, but I'm saying you have to do research. You have to talk to the people, your ancestors, the great grandmother. Look and see, you know, the different things that you know that they explain to us. So I think research is a big component, and if we do more research instead of just going by what everybody say in the books, I think we'll be fine, because our history will never surpass everything with just a book.
All right, we covered a lot. I like to conclude this video. That's it.